I'm going to share with you today 3 tools that you can use to help make the co-parenting process go a little bit more smoothly. Hi, I'm Alicia Kinslow, the attorney and founder behind Kinslow Law, a family law and estate planning practice based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When you're splitting up from your significant other and you have children, it can be a very daunting task to figure out exactly how you're going to co-parent your children in 2 households. Sometimes it's difficult to figure out how to do it when you're living in the same household. I have a teenager, so I know from experience that it can sometimes be difficult figuring out the best way or the best course of action when certain things are going on. So, the first tip that I'm going to share with you is to see a co-parenting counselor. Some courts actually recommend this and can order it, but you can seek this out without even needing to go to court. You and your children's other parent can decide to go to a co-parenting counselor who's going to give you some tips on how to figure out certain things when it comes to co-parenting between 2 households. So, for example, one of the things you may want to address is going to be communication. Now, if you're coming off of a breakup, that's going to make it even more difficult, especially if it's acrimonious, to figure out how to communicate with this person who you may have some hard feelings with about challenges now going, with regard to your children. So a good co-parenting counselor is going to give you tools or tips on how to communicate with that person, how to set aside whatever your relationship issues are and talk about what you need to talk about with regard to your children and how to keep it civil and to do so. And also how to recognize challenges that may be going on with your children. They're going to also give you some tips on how to make certain decisions with regard to your child. So again, even when you're in the same household, it can be 2 very different types of disciplinarian styles going on. And when you're outside of the household, these things can be exasperated. Now, if you add in a child who knows how to kind of manipulate each parent, and children naturally do this, they kind of figure out which parent is a little bit easier, which parent is a little bit more difficult. Hey, if mom said no, maybe dad will say yes. And if they know that they have the distance between you and maybe that there are some hard feelings between you, they can use that to their advantage. And a good co-parenting counselor is going to give you some tips on how to deal with that. In addition to being an attorney, I also host a podcast called A House Divided. And that podcast is about family litigation issues, but where I bring on guests in different disciplines to talk about how to kind of navigate the family law situation. One of the guests that we had on early on in the podcast was Janae Johnson, who is a teen therapist. And she shared a lot of tips with us on how to recognize different things in your children. For example, if they are struggling with the new setup of the 2 households, how to recognize things before they really get to a bad point. If their grades are dropping, you might not notice that until a report card comes home 2 months later. So she'll give you, in that episode, she gives certain tips on, how to look at their behavior. Are they withdrawing into themselves? Are they not as happy as they normally are? Are their friends changing? Just kind of different ways to be able to notice that maybe something is going on with your child and how to address this with the other parent and how to address this with the child. And a good co-parenting counselor is going to do the same thing. They're going to give you tips on how to recognize challenges going on with your child and how to deal with them. Another thing that Janae Johnson mentioned in her episode and that co-parents also address is going to be split loyalties. And that's where the child is telling one parent what they want to hear, what they think they want to hear, and telling the other parent what they think they want to hear. So they may say, hey, I hate at dad's house, when they really like it. And that's because they see that mom is still hurt, or that they want to make mom feel better, or they're scared or embarrassed to tell mom that, hey, I kind of really like it at dad's house, or vice versa. So their children love you and they want to make you happy. So sometimes they're going to kind of change up the truth a little bit to kind of do that. And you want to be able to recognize that and address that in your children and make sure they feel that they don't have to do that. And that's really important in a custody battle. I've seen a number of times as an attorney where the child is, we take a course of action in litigation, sometimes to find out that the child is telling one parent one thing and another parent the other thing. So it's very important to get those tools from a co-parenting counselor and maybe even a counselor for your child to be able to deal with that. And then with regard to the co-parenting counselor too, she's going to help you to she's going to help you to make decisions as well. So how do we decide, on religious, on our what type of religion we're going to bring our child up in, or how are we going to make the decision? Not necessarily to make the decision for you, but how will you make the decision? Those are things that are important too. All right. So the second tool that I'm going to share with you today is going to be having a parenting plan. So that kind of ties into what I was just talking about in terms of making decisions. And what I'll do is I'll leave my website on the show notes, And that way you can subscribe to the website, and what we'll do is we'll email you back a parenting plan. A parenting plan is just that. It's a list of things to think about when you're making a decision in terms of how you're going to parent your children. And the way that we draw up the worksheet is it's not legally binding until you have it as an order in court. But it's a lot of things that sometimes people don't think about, even as they're going through the court process. They're not thinking about how are we going to decide which religion we're going to raise our child? How are we going to decide when and how we're going to swap time? How are we going to decide what happens if, our child doesn't want to follow the order anymore? So a good parenting plan kind of gets you to think about these things that are not issues yet, so that you can kind of decide them with hopefully a clearer head before you're in the middle of the issue. So using a parenting plan, kind of drafting that up, sharing it with the other parent, trying to work through that, come to an agreement on what you can come to an agreement on, and then figure out how you're going to figure out the rest of it. It's going to be extremely helpful. And then whenever there's an issue, you can kind of revert back to the plan and say, hey, this is what we agreed on, and this is what we should follow, or this is how we need to tweak this a little bit to make it work for what it actually feels like to be in the middle of the situation. All right, the third tool I'm going to share with you is going to be a co-parenting app. So in addition to having therapists on the podcast, I also had a spokesperson come from Our Family Wizard, which is a co-parenting application that you can download on your phone. And I'm not endorsing one app over another. I just want to kind of let you guys know that if you want to hear more about it and hear somebody talk about it, you can go listen to the episode, and I'll link to the podcast in the show notes. But Our Family Wizard and some other co-parenting apps allow you to kind of centralize all the information regarding your children. So all the communication can take place there instead of texting here and emailing here and phone calls here. You can have all the information in one place, and it's easier to find and remember and kind of keep a thread going. You can put in information like doctor's appointments. There's a calendar there. You can upload pictures. You can figure out how to swap time. You can do time swaps on there. One of my favorite things about the Our Family Wizard app is that there actually is a meter on there, a language meter. It's awesome. So basically, if you're communicating within the app and someone uses language that is, abusive, there's cursing, there's sarcasm, it can flag it and say, hey, you might want to, kind of change that up a little bit. I think that's extremely helpful because sometimes we're reacting to things even when we don't mean to, and that can cause things to go way further left than they need to. So I like the idea that that particular app has a type of meter because it reminds parents to kind of take a step back and kind of rephrase the language. And sometimes, we're sarcastic even we don't mean to be. So that'll actually catch language too, where you're not even intending to cause an issue, but may end up causing an issue in communication. All right, so those are 3 tools that you can use to kind of help make the process smoother when you're co-parenting. So that is talking to a co-parenting counselor, also using a co-parenting app, and using a parenting plan. I hope you found this information helpful. Remember that none of this is legal advice. You should always consult with an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction about the facts specific to your case. If you enjoy these episodes, please hit subscribe. You'll get more tips about custody, divorce, support, and estate planning. By subscribing, you'll get a notification. Until next time, take care.